Hello everybody, I'm KC, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About. Today, I have a confession to make. I am a Sonic the Hedgehog fan. Oh yeah, you think it's tough to admit you're a brony or a Steven Universe fan on the internet when you're a completely reasonable human being? Sonic invented the toxic reputation fandom. But like almost every other fandom with a bad reputation, it's only a small portion of really crappy stuff that's more vocal and easier to find in a Google search. Sonic may not have the best track record or reputation lately, but I am still a loyal fan of the Blue Blur, because there is a lot of good to be found in this franchise. Despite the fact that the games have been called out time and time again for trying to branch out from the gotta go fast gameplay style that made Sonic famous, when the games do take a risk, sometimes they actually pay off. The best example of this is Shadow the Hedgehog. Yes, Sonic's emo palette swap doppelganger that is the closest rival to Sonic himself for most popular character. Now, I love Shadow. Not as much as some other fans do, but I do find Shadow to be one of the more interesting Sonic characters, and naturally, I'm now going to talk about why. But since Shadow is the only major Sonic character so far with a consistent backstory who has made many appearances throughout the Sonic franchise, we're going to do things differently here. Shadow will have 3 videos dedicated to him and his various interpretations as a character. Here, we'll be talking about Shadow in the games, part 2 will cover his appearances on the Sonic animated shows, and in part 3, we'll go over Shadow's appearances in the Sonic the Hedgehog comic books. And because there's only so many hours in a day, I will not be going over every appearance Shadow's made in the video games. My big blind spot is the handheld games, because that's when the continuity gets weird. But even with that restriction, there's still a lot to cover. So sit back and watch me discuss an anthropomorphic hedgehog way more than I probably should. This is a character study of Shadow the Hedgehog. Shadow was first introduced in Sonic Adventure 2, which marks Sonic's 10th anniversary. He went through several design phases, even having a more cat-like look at one point that would eventually inspire the design for Blaze the Cat. But eventually they decided on a darker, more sinister-looking version of Sonic. Apparently before the game was released, they wanted to keep what exactly Shadow was a secret. In the first trailer for the game, Shadow's name wasn't even revealed. Some people just called him Anti-Sonic because, well, just look at him. And apparently during development for the game, the name Terios, which means reflection of, was even considered. Though I don't know how true this is, since I can't find a definition of the word Terios to confirm this, but moving on. Once the game came out, it was clear why they wanted to keep Shadow such a secret. Sonic Adventure 2 is split into 2 stories, the hero story and the dark story. Pretty much everyone I know, including myself, played the hero story first. In the hero story, Shadow is introduced as a thief, stealing the Chaos Emeralds for Dr. Eggman. And since he kinda sorta looks like Sonic, Sonic's been getting in trouble for his crimes. Even though in the dark story, they have very bright spotlights shining on Shadow, yet they still can't tell he isn't Sonic. Whatever, everyone else has pointed out how dumb the people are in this game, so that's all I'm gonna say on the matter. Shadow is also mistaken for Sonic because he can run as fast as Sonic. Not only that, but he has many different powers that can be harnessed and amplified by the Chaos Emeralds, including the projectile attack Chaos Spear, the explosive attack Chaos Blast, and his signature move, Chaos Control, which he can use to teleport short and great distances and even temporarily freeze time. All of this and his mysterious presence made Shadow a force to be reckoned with. Shadow continues to act incredibly antagonistic throughout the entire hero story, assisting Dr. Eggman in his plans for world domination. He shows up, Sonic beats him up, next level. You really only see Shadow as the bad guy, and you don't learn anything about him through the entire hero campaign. But what I loved about Sonic Adventure 2 is how they handled how to present Shadow's story. I remember never even intending to play the dark story because I had no interest in playing as the bad guys. But I eventually gave it and played it, and it completely changed how I viewed the game and Shadow. During the dark story, we find out that Shadow was actually created to be the ultimate life form by Dr. Eggman's grandfather, Gerald Robotnik, 50 years prior to the game's events on a facility called the Space Colony Ark. But the Ark was raided by the government, who believed the research being conducted there was too dangerous. Shadow survived because his friend and Professor Gerald's granddaughter, Maria, set him free, and was killed because of it, which is why Shadow was discovered by Eggman in the present day. Because of this, Shadow wanted revenge on humanity for what they they took from him. One of the themes in Sonic Adventure 2 is the dichotomy between good and evil, and things aren't always what they appear to be. This is also portrayed with Rouge, who is perceived as a common jewel thief, but turns out to be a clever government agent, but it's shown most prominently in Shadow. At first, he appears to be a pawn for Eggman, but as the game goes on, you understand his motives more. That he's looking for what he believes is justice on an entire planet for the actions of just a few. Cliché? Probably. That's because it works. And this is Shadow's major motivation through the entire game until we get to the final story. The Space Colony arc starts on a collision course towards Earth, and it's revealed that Gerald Robotnik programmed it to do that after all the Chaos Emeralds were placed inside for revenge against the world for the death of Maria. And we learn about this from a video that was uploaded to the arc from the professor's prison cell, where the government is helping him film this. Now, I can kind of understand the government not taking the statements of a grief-stricken, presumably mad scientist too seriously, but for crying out loud, it wouldn't have hurt to go up and double check. I'd imagine it's expensive to fly up to the space station, but if you can fly dozens of soldiers up there to satisfy your own paranoia, I think you could spare a chunk of your budget just to make sure something capable of obliterating the planet doesn't come crashing down on it. But back to Shadow, who is completely okay with what's about to happen while everyone else is running around trying to stop the Ark, because he wants the same thing his creator did, revenge for Maria. But after a conversation with Amy, he realizes that's not what Maria wanted. He remembers that Maria wanted him to protect the planet she loved so much, and Shadow decides to keep his promise. For realsies this time. Some fans complain about this, saying that it's ridiculous that Shadow wouldn't remember that until Amy talked to him, but I think the fact that everything he ever knew or cared about was taken away from him in one fell swoop and being contained by the very people who did that for 50 years gives him a free pass on any details he might be hazy on. Also, Shadow might have been brainwashed by Professor Gerald into suppressing that. I don't know, it's something they hint at but never really go into, so take it with a grain of salt. And this is what made Shadow so memorable. He went from seeking vengeance and not believing humanity is worth saving, to protecting the world by remembering how much Maria loved it. Again, cliche, but it works. So the world is saved thanks to the combined efforts of Super Sonic and Super Shadow, but Shadow uses up all of his strength in the final battle and sacrifices himself in the process. But by his new friends, he'll be remembered not as a villain, but a hero. So that's it, right? Well, if it was, this would be a much shorter video. This was originally meant to be Shadow's only appearance, but once the Sonic team saw how popular he got with fans, they decided that it might be interesting to keep him around. Enter Sonic Heroes. Sonic Heroes is probably the most basic in structure of the 3D Sonic games, but that doesn't mean there isn't anything to talk about, especially with Shadow. Rouge breaks into Eggman's lair and discovers Shadow in suspended animation. How did he survive after the events of the Ark? Well, Shadow doesn't seem to know because he has amnesia. Yep. We're doing that. Mr. Enter probably had the best description for the amnesia story, that it's a concept that has all the appeal of speculative fiction, but can literally be done in any series. Now, the amnesia plot isn't as big a red flag for me as it is for others, because I've seen it done right, and when you do it right, you can get some engaging material out of it. Is that what we get here? Kind of. There is a goal for each playable team to accomplish in the game, but they are all more or less doing the same thing, with not much going on in between stages. Team Dark is probably the team that has the closest thing to an arc due to Shadow's memory loss. He goes along with Rouge and new companion E123 Omega just kind of because they said so, but along the way he keeps looking for answers. Why doesn't Rouge, someone who hacked into the database, the man who created him and may know more about Shadow than he did before he lost his memory, tell him anything? Well, I always thought it was just because she was keeping her eye on the prize. Rouge is a treasure hunter. Her first priority is to get the shiny, expensive things. It always has been, it always will be. But about halfway through the Team Dark campaign, the group discover a robot version of Shadow in the debris of one of Eggman's ships. This leads Shadow and Rouge to question what exactly he is. Is he the real thing or just an android? Rouge doubts Shadow is the real deal even more when she discovers an entire chamber of Shadow androids in suspended animation. But Omega assures her that in order for these androids to be made, the original has to exist somewhere. And that's kind of it. Like I said, this game wasn't very story-driven, so Shadow's amnesia really isn't focused on that much. Mostly it's just Shadow not recognizing anyone and asking a lot of questions he never gets the answers to. But the androids were an interesting plot point, and overall this was a pretty good setup for this part of Shadow's story. The payoff, however, was, well, rated T. Yes, the next main game in the Sonic series was Shadow's solo game, Shadow the Hedgehog. Now, I don't hate this game as much as pretty much everybody else does, but as far as trying to defend the story, I've got nothing. If there is one thing I can immediately agree with, is that the plot to arguably the most important part of Shadow's character arc is a convoluted mess. If you don't know, Shadow the Hedgehog is a choose-your-own-adventure game, with 10 possible dramatically different endings. Because of this, there are dramatically different plot points that are near impossible to glue together into a cohesive whole. And considering the intriguing potential the last game left us with, and the fact that this clearly wasn't going to be Shadow's last appearance, this was a really dumb move. I'm not even going to try to properly piece all the plot points together because, like I said, it's next to impossible, but I will mention a few bullet points in this story just to give you an idea of what's going on. Shadow was recruited by Black Doom, leader of an alien race known as the Black Arms, to gather up the Chaos Emeralds for him so he can, what else, take over the world.
Of course!
And you thought that meme was dead. Black Doom says he knows Shadow, which, given the state Shadow is in, is enough to get him to listen to him. Depending on how you play the game, Shadow's adventure could be as an unquestioning ally to Black Doom, a rogue who decides to get the Chaos Emeralds without anyone's help, or joining Sonic and the gang to stop the Black Arms, hoping it will give him some answers. And the Chaos Emeralds. Because swearing aside, this is still a Sonic game, so it's still all about the Chaos Emeralds. Any of this could end with Shadow being a psychotic follower of the Black Arms, a complete loner believing he should have never been created, a freedom fighter who swears to protect the Earth, or thinking he's an android and possibly killing Eggman. Yeah, remember that intriguing plot point from Sonic Heroes of Eggman creating multiple androids of Shadow, making us question if the character we've been following is even the real Shadow? Only lightly touched on here. Eggman doesn't even go into why or how he made these things. And not only that, but it turns out that this is the real Shadow, which is great, but we never find that out in the main story. You only discover this if you spend long enough in the final boss battle for Eggman to blurt it out while you're in the middle of saving the world. That, or you can look it up on the Sonic Wiki like I did. It's an incoherent jumble of ideas that constantly contradicts itself, and when it's an established character that you want to keep around, you cannot do that. There are some good ideas here, but none of it seems to leave an impact because Shadow is just wandering around like,
Who are all of you people? I don't remember half of you at all. I just wanted to find out just who I am!
What does make a bit of sense is the final story. It makes the choices you made in this game completely irrelevant, but screw it, it's something I can work with. So how is Shadow connected to Black Doom? The short version is that Professor Gerald hit a dead end in his research on Project Shadow. So Black Doom offered to give the professor some of his blood in exchange for the Chaos Emeralds, which he agreed to, and thus Shadow was created. Which technically means Shadow is genetically related to the Black Arms, which means he's part alien. A lot of people have a problem with this. I don't. Moving on. This also plays in the Shadow being split between good and evil again, right down to his creation. Black Doom assisted in Shadow's creation to use him as a tool for his future invasion, and Gerald was going to do the same, except he was using Shadow to help find a cure for Maria's illness. Professor Gerald had the more well-meaning motive, but make no mistake, Shadow was originally just an experiment and nothing more. Or at least, that's how it was at first. Black Doom's hold over Shadow completely immobilizes him until he's shown another recording of Professor Gerald. But this one is a lot less grim than the last one. He explains that he made a terrible mistake trusting Black Doom. What? This guy? How could you possibly second guess trusting this guy? Actually, you know what, in hindsight, this might explain why the government was so adamant on shutting down the Ark. But he also says that he trusts Shadow will be able to stop him, and going by the way he talks to him, Gerald clearly saw Shadow as more than research at that point. Instead, he puts faith in him to do things better than he did, even regarding him as family. Before promptly using him as a tool again after he went insane, but Shadow did fulfill that faith his creator put in him. In more ways than he could have imagined. And it's here where Shadow comes to the same realization he did in Adventure 2, but with a bit of a twist. That it doesn't really matter what he was created to do, he's capable of growing beyond his original purpose. All that matters now is what he chooses to do and no one else, even becoming better than his creator by putting what happened to Maria behind him rather than letting it consume him. Maybe not the most compelling resolution to something that was so intriguing, but whatever. With that, Shadow stops Black Doom and his army and saves the world. Again. So he walks off into the sunset, ready to define himself on his own terms. And that's probably the best thing I could say about this game story-wise. I know some people had a problem with the final story, but if they wanted to keep using Shadow, this gimmick was always going to contradict itself. Oh, and Shadow had guns. Did I forget to mention that? I wasn't a fan of the multiple endings, but I did like this final chapter. At the very least, it wrapped up Shadow's story so he could move forward instead of stepping back. And I'm sure the next Sonic game would be much more well put together than that. Yeah, you know it's coming. Oh, Sonic 06. What potential you had. While this game does deserve its infamous reputation for what a complete mess it is, both in regards to its gameplay and story, Shadow to me is one of the saving graces of this game. Sure, his gameplay isn't much better than the others, but his story is the most well put together, a great follow-up after the events of the previous games, and by far the best in this game. Here, we learn that Shadow has joined Gun as a special agent, after what I can only imagine was the most awkward job interview in history. Still, Secret Agent Shadow? That's pretty cool. He's helping Rouge officially now, and they're tasked with retrieving something called the Scepter of Darkness. But after an ambush by Eggman, the creature inside the scepter is released and uses Shadow to take his form, introducing himself as Mephiles the Dark, the main villain for the game. Shadow confronts Mephiles more than any other character in the game, including Sonic, and after a while it starts to become personal. At one point, Shadow is trapped in the future with Mephiles, who reveals that in the future, Shadow was captured and imprisoned after humanity looked for someone to blame for a future disaster. I always theorized that this was because Mephiles caused the disaster while still in Shadow's form, but that's just a theory. We don't even know if Mephiles is telling the truth or not, but he uses this to try and convince Shadow that humanity isn't worth defending, and tries to get him to join him, because no one else has tried that before. But this gives us one of Shadow's greatest moments.
That's absurd. Whatever it is you want to do, you can do it alone.
You forgive humanity this folly, then?
I determine my own destiny.
There. Right there. That is the apex of Shadow's character development. That is the payoff for everything that happened to Shadow in Sonic Adventure 2 and Shadow the Hedgehog. After everything he's been through, he finally knows who he is and what he wants. He's not going to be manipulated by some one-off bad guy again. He's done with that, and instead sticks to his convictions and fights Mephiles with all he's got. But that doesn't mean that the mere idea of that happening to him hasn't shaken him up a bit. But he's more sad than angry. For all he's done and all he's changed, Shadow might find it disheartening that the world could still see him as a threat, simply because he is still very powerful. Instead of being haunted by the past, he starts to worry about the future. Still, he doesn't let it get to him when it counts, and his growth is even more obvious when he meets Silver the Hedgehog for the first time. You see, Silver was tricked by Mephiles into thinking that Sonic was the one who caused the disaster in the future, and is now out to destroy Sonic to save the world. But Shadow sets Silver straight. Silver is in the exact same position Shadow has been in multiple times by this point, so he knows how to help Silver see the truth. He knows what it's like to have your own suffering twisted to fit someone else's means. This is what I love about character progression. Shadow's made many mistakes, but he has grown, and in this story, he's helping someone else using his own experiences. Sonic 06 may be a train wreck of a game, but I don't think people give Shadow's storyline enough credit. It's easily the most solid story going on in this game. Shadow has been a character in search of an identity. Everyone who knew who he was supposed to be is gone, so throughout the games, he's been on his own search to find out what being the ultimate life form means to him, and how that title changes as he does. Sonic 06 gives Shadow a very comfortable place. He doesn't know what his actions may mean in the future, but he's not letting what has happened or what might happen dictate him anymore. Now he knows who he is and what he believes in, to fight alongside his newfound friends to protect the planet. Realized in probably the coolest scene in any Sonic the Hedgehog video game.
It's futile. The world will betray you. Why fight at all? Why risk your life for those who will persecute you later?
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.
So yeah, Sonic 06 is a hot mess, but I think some quality can be salvaged from this wonderful story of development and growth for Shadow the Hedgehog. From this point on, Shadow's role in the Sonic games got a lot smaller, possibly due to his character arc essentially being complete, but more likely because Sega was moving away from the adventure style of games where Shadow thrived after how poorly received Sonic 06 was. He shows up every now and then in the handheld games and has a couple of cameos in Sonic Generations, and he was Sir Lancelot at one point. Sort of, but nothing even close to what he had before. Still, it was nice to see him around, even if he wasn't doing much. Even with such small roles, Shadow still had a presence. He was still the no-nonsense character and reluctant ally to Sonic and the gang that we come to know and love. Shadow was still Shadow, and I'm sure nothing is gonna change that.
Saving the world? You? Don't make me laugh. You're weak. And you know what makes you weak? Your loyalty to your pathetic friends.
So this is the worst Sonic game. Even the most hardcore Sonic fan tends to have that one game in the franchise where they see it and ask, what were they thinking? For me, that's Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, and I am really good at looking at the positives. I could find things to like, even love, in Sonic 06, but with Rise of Lyric, nothing, especially when it comes to the story. One of the biggest offenders story-wise is Shadow. For those who don't know, this game was supposed to be a reboot for the franchise, so the characters are different versions, which immediately raises questions about what Shadow, the only Sonic character with a consistent backstory, is even doing in this universe. What does he do that's so important they decided to forget this contradiction? He pops up out of nowhere and interrupts the plot to fight Sonic because he doesn't like him. So they fight for a while through some portals in time. I have no idea, just go with it. Then he's quickly disposed of and isn't seen again until a brief scene at the very end of the game. Where do I begin? I think the most important question here is why? Why was Shadow here? What was his problem with Sonic? Sonic and Shadow have fought 100 times before, and for much better reasons, but hey, it's not like there's some other Sonic character with a time travel gimmick whose backstory was kinda sorta retconned, so this wouldn't be a problem. And it's not like there's already a Sonic doppelganger in this game that wants to destroy him. No, this really needed to be Shadow. I get that they're rivals, but nowadays, Shadow and Sonic have a more frenemy relationship. The way Shadow talks to Sonic may have made sense back in Adventure 2, but here, the holier-than-thou snark is mind-blowingly out of character. Not to mention that, again, this is a different universe. Shadow's attitude towards Sonic, or what he's even doing in this game, is never established or explained. He hates Sonic, grinds the game to a halt for a pointless boss battle, and then leaves. Nothing about Shadow's very brief appearance really adds anything to the game, so why is he even there? Well, to me, it seems like it was trailer bait. They put one of the most popular characters in a game that looks very different from most Sonic games to lure in speculative fans. I know I was excited to see Shadow in this game, but I just was not a fan of the portrayal here. Not only was it redundant, it was pointless. It just felt like such a waste. I heard that originally Shadow was supposed to be under the control of the game's main villain, Lyric, which wouldn't have been a perfect fix, but it would have made more sense. This idea was realized in the 3DS game Sonic Boom Shattered Crystal. His personality is still a bit off, but it's more tolerable than his Rise of Lyric appearance, so progress? Well, at least he wasn't in Fire and Ice. All I can say is thank God that this is reportedly a separate universe from the world of Sonic we know, because if it wasn't, I'd be a lot angrier at this game. So the past few games haven't been the best for Shadow, but he is set to appear in the upcoming Sonic Forces, alongside a group of bad guys working for Dr. Eggman. Are you kidding me? This does look bad, but we really don't know what this even means yet. Sonic Forces does look like it's going to be a good game, so for now, we'll just have to wait and see. But whether it works out or not, I do hope the Sonic team keeps bringing Shadow into the games, because maybe then they'll explore his potential again. Regardless of what you think of the games themselves, Shadow brought an important aspect to the Sonic franchise. The idea of moral ambiguity in a game that was, before, very clearly good versus evil. Every idea and aspect of Shadow was practically unheard of in the Sonic games before that point. But his success with fans kept encouraging them to push the envelope a bit, which would give us more fan-favorite characters. Sure, there are times where this could have been utilized a lot better for richer storytelling, but what is there is pretty ambitious, at least by Sonic standards. Shadow is a righteous anti-hero, and his story and character left a lasting impact on me as a player. Sonic Adventure 2 was my first Sonic game, and I couldn't be happier that my introduction to the Sonic the Hedgehog universe came with Shadow right alongside the blue blur. But just because Shadow's story in the games wasn't as great as it could have been, that doesn't mean there wasn't other Sonic media out there who would take Shadow's character and concept and play around with it themselves. Next time, we'll cover how well Shadow did on the small screen. Until then, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.
Hey!